Ever wonder what life was like for the other half of the Roman Empire? We always hear about the legions, the emperors, the gladiators. But what about the women? Let's be real. If you had a time machine, you'd probably want to set the dial for anywhere but ancient Rome, if you were born a woman. Today, we're pulling back the toga to see why it really wasn't a great time to be a Roman woman. First things first, let's talk names, or rather the lack thereof. Imagine being a girl in a Roman family. Your dad's name is, let's say, Gaius Julius. He has 2 daughters. What are their names? Julia Major and Julia Minor. Yup, Julia the elder and Julia the younger. If he had a third, Julia Tertia. A fourth, Julia Quarta. You get the picture. Your identity was literally just a female version of your dad's name, plus a number. It's like being a sequel, not a main character. So you've got your non-name. What's next? Education. While some upper-class girls did get a basic education at home, learning to read, write, and manage a household, it was a far cry from the formal schooling their brothers received. The goal wasn't to broaden your mind or prepare you for a career. The goal was to make you a more appealing wife and an efficient household manager. Your brainpower was seen as a tool for your future husband's benefit, not your own. Forget philosophy or public speaking. Your curriculum was centered on spinning wool and keeping household accounts. Now, let's get to the main event of a Roman woman's life: marriage. And when I say woman, I really mean girl. It was common for girls to be betrothed as young as 7 and married off as early as 12. 12. Most of us were still figuring out how to do long division at that age. These girls were being handed over to men who were often decades older. And did you have a say in it? Absolutely not. Marriages were business transactions, arranged by your paterfamilias, the head male of the family. Your marriage was about forging alliances, consolidating wealth, or gaining political favor. Your personal feelings were, to put it mildly, irrelevant. Once married, your legal status was complicated. For a long time, you were under the complete control, or manus, of your husband. You were legally his property, just like his house or his horse. You couldn't own property yourself, you couldn't sign a contract, and you certainly couldn't run your own business. Everything you brought into the marriage, including your dowry, belonged to him. It was a system designed to keep women completely dependent. Later in the Republic and into the Empire, a new form of free marriage became more common, where a woman technically remained under her father's legal control instead of her husband's. This sounds a bit better, right? It meant you could inherit property from your own family, but it was still a life lived under the authority of a man. Your father could, in theory, even force you to divorce your husband. Freedom was always conditional. What about your day-to-day life? If you were a wealthy matron, your life was confined to the home. Your job was to be the domina, the mistress of the house. You'd oversee the slaves, manage supplies, and supervise the children's early education. But you were expected to be a model of virtue and modesty. You couldn't just pop out for a coffee with your friends. Your public appearances were limited and always chaperoned. The ideal Roman woman was chaste, silent, and obedient. The phrase, "she stayed at home and spun wool," was the highest compliment you could put on a woman's tombstone. Thrilling, right? And what if you weren't from a wealthy family? Life was even harder. You'd be working in the fields, in shops, as a weaver, a midwife, or a tavern keeper, but you still had zero political rights and faced the same social restrictions. Plus, you had the added burden of hard labor without any of the comforts of the elite. For enslaved women, life was unimaginably brutal, with no control over their bodies or their children. Let's talk about children. A Roman woman's primary duty was to produce heirs, specifically sons, to continue the family line. Childbirth was incredibly dangerous. With no modern medicine, the mortality rate for both mother and child was terrifyingly high. If you survived childbirth, The paterfamilias had the power of life and death over the newborn. He could decide whether to raise the child or, especially if it was a girl or had a disability, to leave it outside to die of exposure. Can you imagine going through the ordeal of childbirth only for your child's fate to be completely out of your hands? And after all this, what about your voice? Did you have one? In the public sphere, no. Women were completely excluded from politics. They couldn't vote, couldn't hold office, and couldn't speak in the forum. Their opinions on law, war, or the running of the state were considered worthless. The entire world of power and public life was a men's-only club. You could be incredibly intelligent, witty, and insightful, but society had no place for you to express it outside the four walls of your home. Of course, there were exceptions. Powerful empresses like Livia or Agrippina the Younger wielded immense influence behind the scenes, using their connections and their sons to shape the empire. There were also a handful of independent businesswomen and respected priestesses like the Vestal Virgins. But these were the outliers, the exceptions that proved the rule. For the vast majority of women, life in ancient Rome was a story of limitation, dependence, and silence. So, while we admire the aqueducts, the Colosseum, and the epic history of Rome, it's crucial to remember the millions of people whose stories were never written down. The women who built the families, ran the households, and gave birth to the next generation, all while being treated as second-class citizens. It paints a much more complete and much more sobering picture of the Roman world. It really makes you appreciate the progress we've made and reminds us how important it is to keep fighting for equality for everyone. Thanks so much for hanging out and diving into history with me today. If you found this interesting, please give this video a like and don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration into the past. See you next time.